I'm going to use the Noon Finance app to do a cross-check on this video I just saw. It's by a creator called Wealth Logic, and the title of the video is Paying Off Your Debt Early versus Investing. Is Dave Ramsey right? The real math. So in his scenario, he's got two guys. Jake is someone who follows Dave Ramsey's advice, where he takes all of his savings every month and he pays down his debts in order from lowest to highest balance. And once his debts are paid off, he can invest that additional savings every month. Then there's this Marcus character who just takes all of his savings and invests it in the S&P 500 and pays the minimums on his monthly debt payments. So both of them have an identical starting balance sheet. They've got a little bit of savings, a brokerage account with no balance, a 401k with no balance, and then they've got these debts. There's a car loan, credit card, and student loan at 7% interest, 22% interest on the credit card, and 5.5% interest on the student loan. So their balance sheets start out identical. Every month they've got a $600 savings. The debt service looks like this per month, $707 a month, required principal and interest payments. And to this point, everything's identical, but what they're different is there's $600 of savings for Jake, the Dave Ramsey guy. He follows the debt snowball method, which looks like this. He's going to put 100% of his savings towards the credit card first, because that's the lowest balance. Once the credit card's paid off, he's going to pay off the car loan. That's the next biggest balance. Then he's going to put all of that towards the student loan. And then he's going to put everything into a brokerage account once his debts are all paid off. So once the credit card's paid off, he can take what he was paying on the credit card and apply that as additional principal towards the car loan. Once the car loan's paid off, he can take what he was paying towards the credit card and car towards the student loan, and so on. And so while he's throwing his extra $600 a month as additional principal on some of these debts, he's still paying the minimums on the others. Now, Marcus, on the other hand, is taking 100% of his savings and throwing it right into that brokerage account. What most people do when they look at investing into a brokerage account, they assume like returns from an S&P 500, for example. They'll assume a fixed rate of return, but in reality, there is some variance. So I've plugged in a plus or minus 15% variance every year. It'll average out to 7.5%, but that volatility drag is going to have an effect. So I'm accounting for that, whereas the other video is assuming just a fixed rate of return. And then as the video goes on, he mentions that there's a 401k match, so I've got that plugged in as well as a payroll deduction. So the take-home pay is what it probably should be, and then there's his payment towards the 401k plus an employer match comes out to about $412.50. So they're both doing that, and the 401k I'm assuming is getting a similar rate of return. Here's a nice little Sankey diagram of where their money goes every month. The savings for Jake goes towards the credit card, and the savings for Marcus goes to the brokerage account. So where they start out with the same balance sheet, the same monthly savings, but where they allocate that monthly savings is going to give them a different projected wealth path down the road. So let's just go right to the comparison page. The forecast page is going to look at what their net worth is over the years. So if we look at, here's Marcus's, for example, here's his assets and liabilities over the years, and here's his balance sheet year by year. Let's just go right to the comparison page where we can look at them side by side. So let's start with a 3-year time horizon. We got similar results to what the video is saying. We're looking at, it's showing a positive net worth because we've got the 401k contribution. So if we were to turn that off, they would be negative like they said in that video. But what we show after the first 3 years is Jake is actually beating Marcus. And the reason being is because the math works out that he's paid off that 22% interest loan on the credit card, and putting additional principal towards a debt is effectively like getting a rate of return that's equal to that interest payment. So with Jake putting extra principal towards that credit card of 22% interest, the math works out that that's the same thing as if he would have taken that money and put it into an investment that returned him a guaranteed 22%. So in the first 3 years when they're paying the credit cards off, that's why Jake ends up ahead. Also, if you look at their wealth range, so there's a 50% chance they fall within this range. Marcus has a slightly higher top end. So, in the 10,000 trials that this software runs, there's a lot of trials where Marcus has really good years in investing. So he's got slightly higher potential than Jake. That being said, Jake has a higher low end. So at the low end, he's projected to have $16,800 of net worth. Whereas Marcus, if he has bad years of investing, could have as low as 12.8 thousand. So that's one of the trade-offs with investing aggressively versus paying off debt, is that likely range of net worth is going to be tighter with a higher low end for paying off debt. Whereas if you invest aggressively, you're going to have a higher upside, but also a lower downside. Let's jump right to the 20-year horizon now. So Jake paid off his debts a lot faster than Marcus, but if you look at just a net worth comparison, they're extremely close over the years. The difference is going to be how their balance sheets are made up. So if we go to a forecast, let's look at Marcus real quick over 20 years. His balance sheet looks like this. You can see his 401k is steadily growing and his brokerage account steadily growing. And the debts are a drag on his total net worth, but they're slowly getting paid off. If we go to Jake, paying off his debts aggressively, we can see that debt is not dragging down his net worth for very long. That gets paid off after 3 years. And then the rate of growth of his brokerage account or 401k is going to increase more rapidly than Marcus's because he's paying off the debts quicker. Marcus just gets a head start on where that brokerage is because he's investing heavily in it for these years where the debt's being paid off. So if we go back to the comparison page, their net worths are pretty similar. It's just the balance sheet breakdown is what's different. In that set of 10,000 trials, they almost had an identical wealth path. Again, it's just the balance sheet breakdown that's different. The assets minus liabilities is similar. Towards the end, it looks like Marcus pulls away. However, if you run the trials again, there are scenarios where Jake pulls out ahead after 20 years. So it really just depends on how that Monte Carlo simulation works out. But overall, they've got a very similar net worth path over the years. It's just kind of a roll of the dice after 20 years who pulls out ahead. Again, the main difference is the balance sheet makeup. So while assets minus liabilities is similar over these 20 years, Jake's going to have lower debt. Marcus is going to have more liquidity, but more debt. The point of the video that I'm basing this off of is that you can't just do the exercise based off of numbers. There's a lot of psychological factors here. So if you just want to get the optimal net worth at the end of the years, do optimally is you'd follow Jake's path for the first 3 years, and then you'd follow Marcus's path and aggressively invest instead of paying off student loans. But the point is that there are some psychological factors here. The makeup of your balance sheet is very important, and you can't just look at your net worth. So being debt-free has some important psychological benefits, as well as giving you options on where to put that monthly savings at the end of the month. So I hope that helps, and let me know what you think.